Dr. Running Horse Collin is one of the founders of the Sacred Way Sanctuary, which is located in Florence, Alabama, in the Native American Horse Trail. She is Executive Director for Sacred Healing Circle, a New Mexico-based 501c3 nonprofit organization that focuses its resources on American Indian programs and communities. She's also proudly serves as part of the administrative team for the Black Hills Sioux Nation Council of Elders. Dr. Running Horse Collins is an award-winning journalist and has held various executive positions at nonprofit institutions around the United States. She has advised state, federal, and Fortune 100 organizations on Native American policy. She lectures extensively throughout the United States and internationally on her people's traditions and history surrounding the horse at academic and Native leadership conferences such as the World Indigenous Peoples Conference on Education, the Canadian Indigenous Native Studies Association, the Alaska Native Studies Conference, and Standing Rock Sioux Nations Conference on Prophecy of the Grandfathers Conference. She practices the traditional ways of her ancestors and is a wife, mother, and grandmother, and a pretty cool person.
Thank you, Paul. And we wanted to make sure we started. Is it not on?
Sound up.
This is a mystery to me.
Actually, proximity.
Oh, okay.
Just
More
go to
proximity. I
proximity.
just got to go. So we wanted to make sure that we started this right today. So Paul and Sky have.
Just take it off the stand.
Oh, like I'm a movie star. So Paul and Sky are going to do a traditional prayer for us to open. So we're going to start with Paul.
Yeah, sure. Let me try. Okay. Collin. Hopefully. Okay, here we go. Please join me in a very special Cherokee prayer I use quite a bit. Ogidoda, Galun Lati, Ogadoski, Osta, Duati, Elohino, Yolda, Iona, Wada. O great one who dwells in the sky world, illuminating all that exists and giving us the good medicine of life, we thank you for your greatest creation of them all, our Mother Earth. Knowing that all is good with your creation, Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for the beauty of it all. Thank you, Heavenly Father, for the National Trail of Tears Association. We thank you, Heavenly Father, for all the lessons we're learning here today. And we pray, Heavenly Father, you would help each of us to defeat our greatest enemy, which is ourselves. In Jesus Christ's name we pray. Wada, Amen, and Amen.
Idadala listi Ogidada Kalala di Ehi Kalago di U Digital Ahi Jigawi Yuhi Gesa Wiganago I Ani Eklohi Odali Eliga Ligada Iskiste Liskani Nagu Bagutoyose Lutohi Yuyuta Tohiwu Manolo Histi.
So thank you, and that was our way to ask permission for the ancestors that guard this place. So thank you. Shannon, thank you so much. Sorry, I still feel those prayers. For everything, for having me speak here. Sorry, I just love you. So that's good tears. Good tears because she's wonderful. So thank you for having us here and for welcoming us so much and letting me speak about my favorite topic in the whole world. So in May, and I need to keep this going right. So Tashunke Iankewi Imagino. My name is Yvette R.H. Collin, and my mother is Estella Running Horse, and my father is Robert Ward. My maternal grandparents are Apollinario Brockman and Peter Running Horse Jr. And my paternal grandparents are Clyde Ward and Anna Gilmore. Thank you. So in May 2017, Sean, that when I graduated? He's my calendar.
Yes.
Yeah. So I did my doctorate work at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And so you can go to the next slide, Sean. And so I did not grow up with horses. I make a joke, but it's not really a joke. We were so poor that even the cats ran away. So this was not, we did not have horses. But I do think that that was a beautiful thing in this case because I didn't have preconceived ideas of what was possible or impossible. And when you're doing research, right, that's a good place to start. If you're really trying to look for truth, right, and real knowledge. So I did about 10 years of pre-research. Can you guys hear me okay? I do. Okay. That sounds like a lot in the Western culture, right? But in a Native perspective, that's not very long. And it took me about 10 years to meet the right elders and knowledge bearers and experts, horse experts, which is an interesting concept in and of itself, a horse expert, but we'll get there. And it gave, 10 years gave them time to know me enough to be able to ask a question. And I had elders from different nations ask if I would take this topic on academically. At the time, I couldn't understand why it would be very powerful, but I know that when my elders ask, it's important, and I can feel spirit. So I said I would be honored to do this. These are the chapters of the dissertation, and I think Shannon mentioned this earlier. I really, really believe, and I believe this will be part of my life's work as I progress, that there are many types of education, and there are different perspectives and versions of things. So, Creator made us all. So I believe personally there is a place for Western academia, and there's a place for traditional knowledge. And if we could bring them together and merge them, we're going to get some truth. And we're going to get something that, a real story, a full story. So I just want you to know a little bit about, that's something I actually believe and I've seen as I worked through this project. And it's quite, to me, it seemed quite beautiful. So anyway, these are the sections. And I knew, it was an indigenous studies program, and I knew people would expect this from me. You have an Indian lady, when I present, I wear traditional clothes, right? But they're not going to expect this, right? So I gave them some fun stuff to think about, kind of put it all together. All right, Sean? Okay, so I don't watch a lot of movies because who has time when you're trying to change the world, right? You got to do stuff. And but my husband, he watches a lot of movies. So he actually found me this, and I loved it. So I'll just give you a moment to read that. So taking away history, right, and making it be a certain way, it's powerful. It can do pretty much everything you need it to do, right? If you're changing someone's mindset about who they are and what they are, and their place in the world, all right, so this sounds simple, but I learned from people's reactions it was quite revolutionary. So here's the history of the horse in the Americas from a typical Western academic perspective, right? You'll read it on horse websites, you'll read it in every magazine, it's everywhere. So they basically say, okay, and I know this like so well, I'm not going to bore you, but if you have specific questions, I'll fill it in. What they believed, and what they say is that the horse originated in the Americas. We didn't get to that till the 1830s, but I'm telling you the way it is now, right? The horse originated in the Americas because the oldest remains they've ever found of horses in the whole world, and the oldest type of horse is in North America. So South Dakota area and Nevada. But that was a fight to get to that, but we got there. And then they say, well, right, because Europeans are credited with bringing the horse and introducing the horse to native people. So they said what must have happened is that between 13,000 and 11,000 years ago, they must have all died out during the Ice Age. Okay. And then there were no horses here until Columbus brought some on his second voyage, which was 1493, and he landed on what we know today as the Caribbean. And then in 1519, that's the first recorded time that Spanish horses were brought to the mainland, which is now Mexico area, right? Mexico City area. And then after that, they escaped in the late 1600s because, well, of course we're Indians, so we stole them all, and I don't know, whatever idea. And that's how they got up to the plains. Okay, so that's what we read everywhere. Sean, go ahead. So I took that version, and then I put it next to what many of the native nations say. And I do want to say not every native nation says they had the horse, right? So for example, the Aztecs, they don't say they ever had the horse. The Mayans, if you're coming the right way and you're asking respectfully for the right reasons, they'll tell you that they had the horse. And there are some recorded sightings of, they even had a horse, marble horse, like a horse sculpture in one of their temples when Cortez arrived. I mean, okay, so we'll get into that. So what they say, this is what the Dakota and Lakota elders say. So they say, according to their oral history, the ancient horse of the Americas survived the Ice Age. They had a horse culture long before the arrival of the Europeans. They said there weren't tons and tons of horses. They survived in patches, and they had a very, very different physical characteristics, and they had a different relationship with them. And so when the Spanish brought their horses over on the ship, some of those horses merged with what we already had. And that when the government ordered them rounded up, when they were putting us all on reservations, they killed them by the thousands. We had a lot of other things that wiped them out too. But anyway, so those are the two versions. So I put them side by side, which I was told was very revolutionary to put, right? And then it was time to deconstruct. Time to take it apart and see what held water, right? Okay, Sean? All right, so as we're doing, I have to say, and I know a lot of you here will understand this, but I didn't, I had elders that asked me if I would take this on, and I went to pray about it. We have a place that's very special. It's called Bear Butte in English. It's in South Dakota, and I went to pray about it before I agreed to take it on. So I had a vision about it up there, and what I heard was that I was to find what was left of our people's horses, learn their story, and bring it to the world, and great medicine would return. Okay, I didn't really understand what that meant, but I felt it was real. And I was trying to think, I wonder what that medicine's going to look like. So our understanding in Native cultures, medicine is that which helps you connect to Creator, helps you get closer to Creator. So that's interesting. So if I was going to put this in a Western format, right, we have to do a literature review. That's usually chapter 2. What happens if most of your history is not validated because they don't value the way you record it and store it? Right? It's got to be in a Western format. But our people didn't write like this. Well, they wrote, just not like this, right? So we record things, so the Mohawks, with using their wampum belts, we have ways we record it, but what if they're not valued by Western academia? All that's gone, right? Does it count? That's an interesting issue. So as I was starting to write this out, I got to explain all of these things, which is really powerful, right? To talk about these issues. So next slide, Sean. I loved this statistic. More than 30,000 manuscripts have been published about American Indians, and more than 90% of that literature has been written by non-Indians. What does that do, right? What does that mean? Is that even accurate and valid, right? So I can read things about my own family, right? Well, you go get a book and it's nothing like what I was taught or what any of my elders remember, but yet that's what's out there, right? So if you're going to do a proper Western academic work, that's what you have to draw from. That's not necessarily going to get you to truth, right? That was just my feeling as I was going through this. That's really an interesting statistic. So these are some of the things I had to deal with and explain. So my literature review looked pretty interesting. I loved this. This is just an example, right? So you're supposed to look at what's written out there. So what I was taught, and granted I went to one of those schools growing up where the teachers got money back on their loans because it's stunk to work there, you know, so that was the school we went to. And so they didn't teach us, you know, great. Some of it was okay, but some of it, like a geography, they skipped because they said, you're not going to go anywhere anyway. Yeah, I remember that. So, okay, so one of the things they taught, I remember, is that all the horses died out because of the Ice Age, right? It froze. And I imagined, right? I have very vivid imagination. So I imagined the whole America's just all of a sudden, maybe overnight, must have all been ice, right? And I'm like, gosh, I guess everything would die. That makes sense. So I had some amazing committee members. And each of them would say, how did you find that guy? That guy's amazing, right? I had a great committee. One of them was a Spanish man who grew up in Mexico City. His family was a very wealthy, noble horse family. And they had fled the dictatorship. And his aunt, I don't know if you've ever been to the Anthropological Museum in Mexico City. It's outstanding. They stole so many good pieces. It's outstanding. His family is the one that created that. So we had really interesting experiences. One night, we were talking about the Ice Age. We'd go visit him, my whole family would come, and the kids would sleep on the couch, and we'd stay up all night talking. And I said something about the Ice Age, and he goes, Yvette, what are you talking about? He said, the whole Americas didn't freeze over. I said, are you kidding me? He said, no. I said, what the heck? He said, Yvette, look it up. There's some pretty good research out there. It's new. But if you know anything about Western academia, it's very compartmentalized, right? So geologists know about geology. Medical doctors know about this part of the body. Lawyers even compartmentalize at what type of law they know. Oh my gosh, so I started looking it up and I went, I couldn't see for 2 days. I was just, everything in my head was going around. So here's a map. It was in 2009, this study was done. So this is the line of where the glacier was during that last ice age. So it went as far south as the Ohio River and New York. All this down here, which is where we live, like Florida is today. What the heck? I felt lied to. I was just stumbling around my yard, looking at these horses going, everybody knows horses are migratory animals. They would have just, right? Not just trace, easy, big trail. I'm thinking, oh my gosh. I call a woman and get an interview. She's an expert on extinction. I went to the University of Alaska Fairbanks. She's in Alaska. So we meet, she's eating her lunch, you know, and I asked her about the Ice Age, and we're talking. She goes, Yvette, whoa. I said, what? She said, it didn't happen overnight. I said, it didn't? She said, no, it was like 1,000 to 2,000 years to come on, and about 1,000 to 2,000 years to go away. And I went, what? So that made no sense to me. I mean, I'm sorry, my horses move. There's a problem, they're going to go. Okay, so that was very interesting. So those are some of the examples of what I found doing the literature review, which were just great, I thought. All right, so reviewing written historical records, and I'm a nerd. I love old things. And my husband is the best shopper in the entire world. So I put and watches movies. And so I put him on eBay Watch. And so what he did is he ordered me old books, like first edition, things that nobody wants anymore, if they had anything about horses. And so what you get are really interesting facts from that time period. And so anyway, I thought this was really interesting because we're here today for the Trail of Tears specifically. But the earliest sighting by Spanish recording of native people with horses. So, right, okay, 1519, the first Spanish horse goes to what we know of as Mexico City. Georgia and the Carolinas, it's these people. 1521, I'm sorry, you can't get horses that nobody knows are missing. In 2 years' time, they make it, and vegetation was thick. I asked people who, remember the Spanish man on my committee? Again, when people say, where'd you find him? I just go like this. It was so perfect. He is from those noble families that made their journey early. So part of what he does to honor his ancestors is he used to do those rides, and he would retrace on horseback the trails that they would use. So he tells me, Yvette, it's impossible. Even today, hard. He said, once the dark comes, you're done. You can't go any further, right? They're not the things we think about. So anyway, impossible to get horses of any number within 2 years between these great distances like that. And they actually saw them with people, and they say that ancestors of those were the Creek Indians. They even had domesticated sheep, all kinds of things. And so what happened, they were sighted and recorded by a slaver, like a slave trader and a captain, and then they had a Native American slave that went with them to help translate and help them navigate. So they're the ones that reported what they saw. And so the king of Spain, he sent his chronicler. Now this is really interesting because the idea of literacy, when I was looking into this and learning about the time period, these explorers, they couldn't write. Most of them couldn't even sign their names. Literacy was that new, even for them. That's important. Why? Because the people recording the history, it's not firsthand. That's important because as I was reading the translations from the Spanish documents directly into English, it was actually cute because they were like, and then 5 million of them ran after me. Guys, right? I mean, I'm sure it felt like 5 million, but you could see the you know, they're just kind of, it was scary for them. They're in a new place and everything was big. And so Carlos sent his chronicler out to interview these guys. Actually, the word was interrogate. So he interrogated these guys who said they saw this for 2 weeks. And afterwards, he didn't go see it. They didn't take him there. Afterwards, this is what he came up with. That's not fact. That's an opinion. Right? Okay, so. All right, so chapter 3, methodologies and methods. I have to be honest. If you really want to help to make a change, you have to communicate in the ways that people understand. Not a judgment. So if I was just going to use indigenous research methodologies, right? Methodologies that work for our people traditionally. Makes them really comfortable, it's respectful. There's all these wonderful places. So I'm comfortable with that. But I wanted to make sure that Western academia could take these findings seriously, whatever they were. So what I did is I used grounded theory. So that's very accepted Western academic methodology, and I merged it with this. I did the two tandem. And personally, I'm both. I loved that combination, right? I have my head works very much in a native perspective. That's how my heart is. But I have that other part of me that I'm really interested. So this grounded theory would help to make sure that I didn't write for an outcome, right? So I'm researching something, and then based on what you find from that, you develop your next question, right? You're letting the data guide you every step of the way. And I actually felt that was really helpful, and it helps you to understand the why of something. And I was really interested, how did we get to where we are right now today with this topic? Okay. All right, so these are some of the qualitative research methods that I used. And I have some personal experience and personal knowledge. These things, written historical, academic, scientific records, interviews, not just native elders, Western scientists, different horse experts, and then my own participation. Okay, chapter 4, data analysis of interviews. So just a breakdown, 19 project participants. Now, I did 10 years of pre-research. Those people are not necessarily included in there because that's not what I based this on. I had to make sure each one of them still wanted to talk to me in a formal way. Many of them said, I'm not the right one. If this is going to go on paper, it needs to be this person. And I respected that the whole way. And some of them said, I want you to write this part, but this part, I just want to talk to you about it. So there's bunches that's not in there, that's just amazing, but they just said it's not the time right now to put it in that format. I made sure to respect every single person's wish on that. It's their story, and they're being generous enough to put it forward so we can come up with a more full picture. This was the timeline of my formal interviews. Like I said, both native and non-native participants, and I conducted these interviews where they were comfortable, which means I was all over North America. I just was. And I treated both native and non-native the same. So I treated them as if they were my native elders, the utmost respect. And our culture also, you give a gift to show your appreciation. And these gifts were interesting because for certain ones, they're gifting me the most sacred knowledge they have about the horse nation. And I had to choose a gift that was equally as sacred and meaningful. So I think the biggest one was 6 traditional Ojibwe horses trailered all the way to Saskatchewan and gifted and free, and it was awesome. So these are the participants, and this is the way they self-identify. That's important because I'm trying to show the mindset, right? Where are they, what's their perspective? So you can just kind of read through that. So I have the whole gamut. Here the participants are divided into 6 categories. Some of them overlap, that's why the numbers don't match. So some of them are more than one of these. And that gives you an understanding of how their perspective, sort of how they frame it, which I think is really important. Go ahead, Sean. All right, so chapter 5, acquisition of the horse, spirituality, healing, and husbandry. So this is what surprised me the most. And maybe it shouldn't, but it really did. I know that our people did not lie. That was not something that was a part of our culture before conquest. Of course, it happens now, it's a result of damage, but that was not acceptable. So if they were telling me something I knew it's likely it's not a lie. I needed to understand, right? I'm not gonna they asked me to research this, and this is what I was gonna do. So acquisition. Now, North America is very big. I focused in North America. These native nations do not share language, they do not share culture, they don't interact with each other, right? So what I found amazing was, hands down, across the map, it correlated. That was pretty powerful for me. So this is just an example. This is a woman, a Ojibwe woman, and this was her story of how they acquired the horse, right? Not one said that they acquired it from the Spanish or from a European culture or anything. Every single one said the horse was gifted to them from Creator in time of great need. So many times they were on a vision quest, that's an English translation, right? Where you're seeking guidance from Creator and from the ancestors. So you're praying, you're out there, you're hungry, you're tired. So I can imagine them praying, and here come these animals seemingly out of the clouds, seemingly out of the rain, right? So the way that we record oral history, it's we're literally telling you it from a person's perspective. So anyway, interestingly enough, many of them said they came from the west in the water, in the rain, out of the ocean, out of the lake. It's really quite something. So, okay, Sean, you can go to the next one. Chapter 6. Oh, and in that chapter 5, you don't have to go back, Sean, but I also included, I guess you could go back just so we're on topic, but we have, many of these nations had horse societies, and these people in these societies were responsible for every single part of the care of the horse. So when we went to battle, the horse was prepared and prayed over just as the man was, or in some cases the women went as well. And we also had medicine people, horse society people who had specific knowledge as to what herbs to feed the horses to ensure healthy pregnancy for all of their illnesses. It was quite involved and in-depth, and so I included some of that in that chapter. All right, so chapter 6, and this one I had great fun with. Because like I said, I didn't know people really expected this from me, so I thought that's a good place to put it. So, analysis of Western equine science. All right, so when I met the Spanish man who agreed to be on my committee, he said, "Where have you been? We could have done this 50 years ago." And he goes, "Wait, 50 years ago there was no technology for this, never mind. Sit down and take notes." It's really cute. So the good thing is we now have Western technology that can measure things it couldn't measure before, right? So we have pretty accurate dating. We can do genome sequencing. We can do a lot, right? Now you have to get people to want to look at horse bones. Dinosaurs are pretty cool. Horses, right? That's kind of an interesting thing. So at the time that Columbus came, 1492, what we know is Spain had just finished an 800-year war with the Muslims. 800 years of war. That's incredible. And the only reason they won that war is because the queen She had her childhood friend as a head of her army, and she told him, just make it happen. He gathered every horse in the vicinity as far as he could, and he took those horses and he made them part of the royal army. And so with those horses, they were able to beat the Moors. So for the Spanish at that time, the horse was a mark of power and civilization, authority, right? And they were incredibly valuable. So fast forward, you're coming over to the Americas. A lot of people don't know this. I didn't know this at the time. There were rules of conquest. The queen was quite religious, the Queen of Spain. I did not find this written anywhere, but I believe after the study that I did, and I'm interested to do more about this, I believe if she had known how, I don't like that word civilized, but you know what I mean, how advanced our people were and how connected they were, their mastery of the horse, all of these things, I don't believe the conquest would have occurred the way it did. I don't think they would have gotten the permission. That's my personal perspective based on how all this time that I spent reviewing records and everything. I think it was that important. And so it just didn't get talked about. Now, there was a case, the term feral is used still in our wild horse policies today, right? Feral horses. So I wanted to look up where that term came from. And we found a case, a legal case, out of Argentina in the 1500s. And remember, these horses are valuable. The Spanish had meticulous records. So they recorded every single horse that belonged to this guy. And a couple years later, they came again, right? Then a few years later, boy, that man had so many horses that he got in big fat trouble, basically, because it went from in the 20s to 127 or 30. And they don't have babies that fast, what's going on? So the way that the guy got out of it was he said, no. I don't owe taxes on these. I didn't steal them from the king. These are feral horses. And they said, what do you mean? And he said, remember Mendoza? He tried to conquer that village over there. He failed. Well, all his horses, they got away, and I just caught them all. Okay, all right. So he got off. So that's where that term comes from. But anyway, he was actually that man was friends with the native population, and what he got them from the natives. So, all right. So let's look at some of the proof that we have out there, right? So here's an example of some petroglyphs. What do you think, Jason? What's that?
Looks like a horse.
And who's on it?
The person.
And what has he got in his hand? Right, he's pretty good on that horse. And honestly, I think that's an excellent rendition because that's what our horses look like. They have that thinner neck and everything. But anyway, I thought that was quite something. And then what happens with that, this I thought was fascinating. So you'll have a rock with all kinds of petroglyphs. They're from different time periods. A lot of times people don't understand why. That is a place of prayer for our people, and they go back and back and back, and they do their prayers there. And if they have a vision, then they record. So that's how the time periods are different in many of those cases. So they said, okay, this is a pre-Columbian area, except this is literally what they do. Oh, that's a horse. So obviously that one's not, because everybody knows horses came with the Spanish. They're not dating them. That's what they're doing. And I went, oh my gosh, I'm starting to understand. It's part of the methodology that they teach the archaeology students. That's one of your signs. If it's a horse, you know it's earlier than 500 years, because everybody knows we didn't have horses. That was something I think that can be corrected. That'd be helpful. Okay, this is a split twig figurine from a cave in New Mexico. It was a ceremonial cave because they found many in particular positions. They said this was probably a churro sheep. Okay, I have some of those. They don't have necks, so the head would be right here. So anyway, I thought that was really interesting how we're reaching to fit into this paradigm in academia, and I actually felt I had compassion for our researchers who are trying really hard to do good work, but they're oftentimes being fit into a paradigm. And they don't match up, so it can be tough. I like these. I like when they're whole horses, right? Not just a little leg bone, because you could say, which they do, that must have somehow fallen into these different layers. They're in the wrong layers. It must have been a mouse going through. They do say this. And so that's why the bone is in an earlier layer than it should be. It happens a lot. But then, oops, look at these guys. That's a whole horse. And they were really confused because it didn't match the dates when the missionaries were supposed to have brought horses up from California. And they weren't shod. They didn't have the characteristics they would have with the Spanish and over. That one was fun. This one I love. What is it? Jason.
Is that a horse?
There's a horse. Okay, but they say it's an anamorphic figurine, which means it's kind of like this. They're not sure what it is. The horse, but how, they're not sure. This was actually found in the Roods Creek area, so here in between Georgia and Alabama, right? And I love this because there's a lot of these here, which I think is wonderful. So they have a pre-Columbian mound, and then they found these. And in many cases, the heads were broken off. And they were really confused about what that means. And I often wonder, well, could you ask some of the native people? Because we could tell you. We could tell you. So this is according to the traditional knowledge from my people and then what I've learned from the Choctaw people. So what they say is the horse always knows how to return to Creator. Doesn't get lost. Like, people, we get confused sometimes. The world's hard on us. It hurts our mind. It hurts our hearts. We get confused. When it's time to go home, we may get lost, right? Lost on the way. The horse nation never gets lost. It's always got one foot in heaven, right? So we knew that. So when, in many cases, our spirituality was forbidden and taken away from us, certain cultures and families held on to the fact that the horse could always get home. And so in some, they would literally, part of the burial was to also take the closest horse to that person's spirit horse. And that person's horse would be the life would go to take that person to Creator so it wouldn't get lost. And some, of course, didn't want to actually do that with the horse. That's a sacred being. So they would make a figurine and then symbolically send it home. And that would be its signal for the spirit to guide the person home. So that much of a horse culture where it's this involved. That's pretty powerful, I thought. Okay, sure. All right, so for the final analysis for me, it wasn't just about whether horses survived the Ice Age or not. I wanted to understand how Western academia and society got to the place it is in today. I wanted to understand that very much. And so, like I said, that grounded theory is really important. And I wanted to make sure I used it in as culturally respectful and appropriate manner as possible when I was doing the deconstruction. So there are a couple of quotes that I found as I was doing this research that I felt explained how we got to this place, or a little bit about it. And this is a quote about cultural invasion. And, the invaders penetrate the cultural context of another group. And ignoring the potential of the latter, they impose their own view of the world upon those they invade, and inhibit the creativity of the invaded by curbing their expression. Cultural invasion is thus always an act of violence, right? So you can see, you guys can read just as well as I can. But us buying into that perspective, us as Native people, that's essential to make this effective, right? So that's something that I see when I look around. Go ahead, Sean. And I loved this quote also. It's by a Scottish author. And I think when I was doing this work, I thought, this is where we are today. We don't have the words for it, so we're just silent. But that's not helping us. That's not getting us anywhere. And Sean, you can go to the next one. There was a work that I found when you have these revolutions within science or academia, right? You have a paradigm that everyone holds on to. And in academia, you get rewarded for towing the line, for quoting your predecessor, right? They want you to keep in that. And those that don't toe the line, they get shunned in a lot of cases. I'll tell you a funny story. There was a professor at my university, very Western, sort of German, European. He actually ended up being one of my participants. He was fabulous. And he said to me when I was deciding if I was going to go to that university, I was handing out things that I had written, but I wrote them for our elders. It weren't academic pieces. And I said that. These are not academic pieces. That's why I'm here. I'd like you to help me to be able to do that. So he said to me later, I don't know, like 6 months or a year later, once I was in his class, I did my final presentation. And he said, Yvette, can I be the first one to comment? I said, absolutely. And I thought, oh, this is my guy I gotta win over, right? Archaeologist, real Western-minded. He said, real, traditional anthropologist, that guy. And he said, Yvette, when you handed me your work, I went home and I read it when you were deciding if you were gonna come to our university. And he said, and I read it and I thought, nobody in their right mind who ever wanted a job in academia would ever take this on. He said, I was impressed. He said, so anyway, I want you to know these things. He just downloaded. He had seen all kinds of evidence when he was excavating in Mayan ruins. He found vases with horse figurines. I mean, all kinds. He was amazing. So he said, Yvette, I got to tell you, I used to cry sometimes when I would find these things, and they would tell me basically, be quiet. Everybody knows there were no horses. You're just a grad student. Go home. And he said he would just sit there. He said, and I would look out, and it was a jungle. And he said, I remember sitting there thinking, well, I guess they're right, because horses, I guess they need meadows, and this is just jungle. So they're right, and then horses couldn't survive. And I said, Mike, and he said, yes, Yvette. I go, do you know what some of my traditional horses eat? And he said, what? I go, vines. He goes, oh my gosh. So it was really powerful for me to see from these experts in their fields how much they had struggled with some of these questions. And they couldn't find it. The paradigm that was accepted wasn't giving them an answer that they could deal with. So anyway, this book addresses scientific academic revolutions, sort of that process. And I remember one part of the book, it said, Einstein, when there was a scientific revolution during his time period, and he was expressing that he just wanted to cry. It was so painful for him to let go of some of these things. But then he eventually got with it, and so this is talking about, some of the older ones might hold on, but the younger ones, they're going to start, they're looking for answers, so the paradigm will be able to shift. I didn't stop with that. So the Western academic part was done, but I feel like now my real work begins, which is sort of the indigenous component, which is bringing it back to the people. What do the people want to do with it? How would they like you to serve with this information? So that's what I work on now. And Shannon gave me my signal, so I'm going to go quick, but I'll let you scan for a minute and then we can go. And I have a great story about this. I'll make it fast, which I think shows the power of it. One of the things I do on Pine Ridge is we're putting in water sensors, right, to measure the clarity of the water and all that, right? Our people really want to protect that water. And we merge it with knowledge from the elders, traditional knowledge, teachings about how to protect the water, how to protect the earth. And I can see we're putting in the water sensors, and you can see the young people, their minds are wandering, So one of the men we were putting in sensors in his well. He's a medicine man, and he comes out and he says, hey, Yvette, you know who visited me this summer? I said, who? And he said, the Mennonites. And I said, well, how was that? And he said, oh, it was interesting. I said, do they come a lot? He goes, yeah, they come in the summers. I said, what do they do? He said, oh, they measure our water. Really? Yeah. I go, what'd they find? He said, out of 8 wells that they measured, the toxicity and level, mine was the only one that wasn't polluted. And I said, I said, do you know why that is? He goes, yep. And I said, why? He said, because after every sweat lodge, we pray, and again afterwards with all the water that's left over, and we pour it down the well. And he said, I've been doing that, we've been doing that for generations. Then I see one of the young girls, boom, her head goes up. And I said, that's what we need to be researching. Things like that is what we need to be researching so we can bring that knowledge to the world. And she just perked up like that. So I just want to make sure that our young people know too, there's a place for our ways in academia. We can do this. So this is, I just want to thank all of these people and thank my horse relatives. They have done so much to, I mean, imagine the topics we covered today. Just in telling their story, over time I realized that's part of that medicine I believe the spirits were talking about. We haven't dealt with what has happened to the Native people in this country. It's too hard. It's hard to talk about. It's painful, but we need to so we can be well as a country. So we're just talking about horses, right? Okay, so Sean, go ahead. And these are just references. Go ahead. These are some photographs. I was thinking, Shannon, we should think about what publication, but I'd like to write a piece for you just on the Trail of Tears, horses during the removal. And I've got almost all of it together, and I went, you know what, I need to offer that to you. So let me know where you think it should go. These are some family photographs from the Locke family, their Choctaw family. And these are in 1910. These are some of their horses. And these are horses, same ones like we have. Their body types are different. Just like high content Native people, we can't process alcohol. We literally don't have certain enzymes for that. Certain foods too high in chemicals make us very sick. These horses are the same way. Their bodies don't respond the same way as European domestic horses to chemicals, feed, different things like that. Here's some of their photos. They're herding their cattle. Piney Woods cattle, I believe is what they told me. So you'll see they're thinner, longer neck like that. That's why I think that petroglyph was so well done. I really can see that facial structure in that neck. Go ahead, Sean. And this is them. That's all the family after I think they're about to go do their cattle. So those are some of their horses. Go ahead, Sean. And okay, so some people have asked me, well, what happened to the horses, the Cherokee or Choctaw horses here in the South? During the Civil War or the war between states, horses were incredibly valuable, and they were taken by whoever needed them. So the only traditional horses that survived from this area are the ones that went on the Trail of Tears, interestingly enough. So when they got to Oklahoma, many of them survived in the Kiamichi mountain range. That is a tough terrain. Good luck trying to catch them. It's a joke. Like, they can outrun you, they can hide from you. It's amazing. So what happened when the government was coming and they were going to round up our horses? Horses? You got horses? I don't need horses. You know, I don't need horses. They're fine up there. I've seen these families call to them, sing to them. Here they come. Ooh, they're just coming down the mountain. So it was one of the most beautiful experiences because there were horses living in wild conditions over 1.5 million acres. And people interacted with them in a way that respected them and their space. It was a feeling I hadn't felt before, and it was very powerful. So they had relationships, they were part of their family. Now this is a saddle. One of the first recorded Cherokee families, this was what the research that I did found, the Whitmire family, they went out a couple years before the official removal because they saw the writing on the wall basically. And they brought a lot of their horses. And so this is their saddle. This is one of the ways that they sort of created their herds. If that particular saddle did not fit the stallion, he was not allowed in that herd because it fits a very particular body type and shape. This was 1890. This was a U.S. Marshal, a Cherokee man, and he would say, I have his quote here because I thought it was really neat. So these pictures were from a man named Brian Rickman. In the 1980s, he and his wife Darlene, who's a Cherokee Choctaw woman, they compiled what was left of these traditional Choctaw paints and Cherokee horses. They had this paperwork, old paperwork. They interviewed elders in the Kiamichi Mountains and everything, and they went and found them and offered to buy them. And he said people thought we were crazy because we had these good quarter horses, and I'm trading them for this old sagging mare, and they don't know why. But he said, I love my wife, and these were critical to her heritage. So they combined this herd, they drove everywhere, and they brought them back together. And so that's where we have what we have left today. It was quite a beautiful thing. So Mr. Rickman said, he explained, quote, they had an old saddle test that the Whitmire family used to determine whether or not a horse could be allowed into their carefully managed herds. Quote, they would say when you were seeking your stallions to breed, make sure that this saddle will fit. If it does not fit, do not introduce that horse into your herd. If that saddle fit, then you knew that if you rode that horse, it would always bring you home. They had really high expectations in those mountains. You had to be able to navigate that. And the normal, sort of more European broader horse, that they just wouldn't do it. They didn't have the stamina. So 3 minutes. Any questions? 15 minutes.
Video production made possible by the National Trail of Tears Association. The Trail of Tears Association is a non-profit, membership-based organization established in 1993 with the purpose of passing the history of this significant event in Native American history onto future generations. If you're interested in finding out more about the Trail of Tears Association or would like to become a member, please visit our website at www.nationaltoda.com. There, you can learn more about the National Association, the state chapters, as well as how to become a member. To connect with the association for upcoming events and to be notified when future videos are released, be sure to like the Trail of Tears Association Facebook page and subscribe to our National Trail of Tears Association YouTube channel. Thanks again for watching this video and for your support.